I still have the footage, every single second of it. I've watched it more times than I care to admit because every time I feel myself starting to doubt whether I did the right thing, I press play and within 30 seconds I'm at peace again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the Tuesday afternoon that split my life clean in two, the before and the after. My name is Chloe Merritt. At 38, I was the editor-in-chief of Feminist Clip, a lifestyle magazine that I had built from a regional print curiosity into a nationally respected brand with a digital audience of over 2 million. I won't pretend it was easy. I was at my desk by 7 most mornings and rarely home before 8 at night. My phone buzzed through dinner, through weekends, through anniversaries. I gave Feminist Clip everything I had because I believed in what we were doing and because I believed that the life it was funding was worth every sacrifice. That life was in a house in the Connecticut hills, 4 bedrooms, a renovated kitchen, a garden that bloomed every April without fail, and a pool in the back that caught the afternoon light in a way that made you feel, for a moment, that everything was exactly as it should be. And then there was Luca Merritt, my husband of 9 years. Dark hair, broad shoulders, the kind of man who walked into a room and people noticed. He was the managing director of a mid-sized engineering firm, successful in his own right, charming at dinner parties, generous with compliments. When we met, I thought he was the most self-assured person I'd ever encountered. Later, I would understand that confidence and arrogance are often wearing the same coat. We were, by every external measure, a success story. The kind of couple that got tagged in congratulatory posts on social media. The kind that friends looked at and said, I want what they have. I believed we were happy. I genuinely did. When you're working the hours I was working, you don't always have time to notice when something starts to go wrong. You trust the structure, you trust the person sleeping beside you because you've built your whole life on top of it. I should have checked the foundation. It was a Tuesday in late September when my afternoon fell apart. I'd been in back-to-back editorial meetings since 8 that morning, and by 2 o'clock I had a tension headache pressing behind my eyes that no amount of coffee was going to fix. My deputy editor, Rachel, took one look at me and told me to go home. The October issue is practically done, she said. Go, sleep. We'll survive without you for one afternoon. I almost didn't listen. I almost stayed. That's the thing I think about sometimes, how close I came to missing it entirely. But I went. I texted Luca to say I was heading home early, but got no reply, so I assumed he was in meetings. I drove the 40 minutes back to the house with the windows down and the radio off, letting the quiet work on my headache. I turned onto our road and pulled into the driveway. Immediately, I noticed the gate to the pool enclosure was slightly open, just an inch or two. But that gate had a spring latch. It always closed itself. We'd had it installed specifically because the neighbors' kids sometimes wandered over in summer, and neither of us ever left it open. Ever. I sat in the car for a moment with the engine off, keys in my hand. Some instinct I hadn't known I possessed told me not to go through the front door. I got out quietly, left my bag on the passenger seat, and walked around the side of the house instead. I stopped at the corner and looked through the gap in the gate. There were 2 wine glasses on the small table by the loungers. One of them still had lipstick on the rim, a coral pink that was definitely not mine, and draped over the back of the chair nearest the gate was my white bathrobe. My bathrobe, with the embroidered C on the breast pocket, the one I'd been given as a birthday gift 2 years ago. Someone had worn it out here and left it behind like a prop. Then in my pool, cutting a lazy backstroke through the water, was a young woman I had never seen before in my life. She was blonde, maybe 26, 27, slim and tanned, with the kind of beauty that doesn't require any effort at all. She was completely at home in that water. That was what hit me hardest, not just that she was there, but how comfortable she looked, like she'd done this before, like this was a place she knew well. I didn't move. I stood at that corner for what felt like a very long time, watching her float in my pool, drinking my wine, wearing the ghost of my bathrobe, in the house that I had paid for with 9 years of 16-hour days, and something very cold and very deliberate settled over me. I slipped in through the front door. Our home, which I thought I knew by heart, suddenly felt foreign, like a stage set I'd been performing in without realizing the script wasn't mine. I moved quietly through the hallway into the kitchen and stood at the window that looked out toward the pool. From here, I could see her more clearly. She'd climbed out and was toweling off with one of our good Turkish cotton towels. She moved through the space like she owned it. She knew where the towels were kept. She knew where the wine glasses were kept. She'd been here before, more than once. I opened the kitchen drawer slowly, silently, the one where we kept the spare keys. There were 3 hooks. 2 had keys. One was empty. He'd given her a key to our home. To our home. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed and I breathed. In, out, in, out. I heard her come through the back door eventually. The distinctive creak of it, then heard her walk through the living room. She paused slightly. Then I heard the tap run in the downstairs bathroom. I stayed completely still. A few minutes later, the front door opened and closed, and she was gone. I was fuming. I sat there in the quiet of my own house and made a decision. I wasn't going to react, not without a plan, because the one thing I knew, sitting on that bed with my hands folded in my lap and my heart very carefully locked down, was this. If I confronted Luca tonight, I would get lies. I would get deflection and damage control. I would get a version of events that he had time to curate. I didn't want his version. I wanted the truth. All of it. I wanted something else too, though I couldn't have seen it fully yet. I wanted him to understand, in a way he couldn't undo, that you do not do this to Chloe Merritt. I made 2 phone calls that evening, both from my car, parked 3 streets away from our house. The first was to my divorce attorney. Not to file anything yet, but to have a conversation, to understand my position, to know what I was standing on before I moved. She was practical and precise, which is exactly what I needed. She told me to document everything I could, to avoid making financial moves that could be construed as dissipation, and to call her the moment I was ready to proceed. The second call was to a man named Derek, who I'd interviewed 2 years prior for a feature on industrial water treatment. We'd stayed in loose contact. He was the kind of person who knew things, who had connections in unusual places. I told him what I needed in the vaguest possible terms, something for a pool, something that would be visible, something that wouldn't cause harm but would cause maximum spectacular embarrassment. He called me back within the hour. I have a temporary skin dye, he said. It's used in theatrical productions, some novelty applications. It's non-toxic, non-irritating, and completely safe. It bonds to the keratin layer of skin when you're submerged for more than a few minutes. Takes about 4 hours to develop fully, and it lasts 3 to 4 days depending on skin type. What color? I asked. I've got blue, he said. Deep, unmistakable blue. I told him I'd take it. He brought it to me the following morning in a sealed container, looking for all the world like a standard pool additive. He also gave me very specific instructions: the concentration needed for skin transfer, the fact that it would disperse harmlessly through the water and wouldn't stain tile or plaster, and the 4-hour development window. It'll start faint, he said, then get stronger. By the time they really notice it, it'll be quite something. That afternoon, while Luca was at work, I made 3 stops. First, a security company where I arranged for a full installation of HD cameras, 4 exteriors covering the pool area, the driveway, and both entrances, and 2 interiors in the hallway and the living room with a direct feed to an app on my phone. They had it done in 4 hours. Second, I went to the pool. I measured, calculated, and added the dye at precisely the recommended concentration. The water didn't change color visibly. It just looked a degree or 2 deeper in shade than usual. Nothing anyone would notice on a sunny day. Third, I drove to Rachel's apartment and asked if I could stay there for the next little while, citing a home renovation that wasn't remotely true. She didn't push. Rachel has always been extraordinarily good at knowing when not to ask questions. Then I went home, packed a bag, kissed my husband on the cheek when he arrived back at 7, told him about a last-minute conference, and left. How long? He asked. Hard to say, I said. Could be a week. He looked relieved. He tried to hide it, but I saw it, a flash of something loosening behind his eyes. I noted that too. I spent the next 2 days monitoring the camera feed from Rachel's sofa, eating her leftovers and watching my own home like a nature documentary. I saw Luca come and go. I saw the blonde arrive on Thursday morning, with a bag this time. as though she was settling in for a stay. I watched her walk through my house with an ease that made my jaw tight. She wore my pool towels. She arranged things on my kitchen counter. She sat on my sofa with her feet on my coffee table, but she didn't go in the pool, not Thursday or Friday morning. I was beginning to wonder if I'd miscalculated when, at 11 o'clock on Friday, I watched her open the back door and step out into the autumn sunshine in a white bikini. I sat forward. She tested the water with her foot satisfied and then, without hesitation, walked to the edge and dove in. I pressed my hand over my mouth. She swam for almost 40 minutes. Long, leisurely laps, afloat on her back in the shallow end. At one point, she simply stood in the middle of the pool, face tilted up to the sun, completely still. She was in that water long enough that by the time she climbed out and wrapped herself in a towel, the process had already begun, though she couldn't know it yet. It would take 4 hours. 4 hours. I checked the time, 11:53. Luca had told me, when I'd texted him the night before to check in as any unsuspecting wife would, that he had a late meeting on Friday and probably wouldn't be home until 9. I'd said I hoped it went well. I'd added a small heart emoji at the end, but I really wanted to put my fist through the wall. He didn't have a late meeting. I knew this because I also knew from a conversation I'd overheard before I left that he'd booked a table at Bellecour, a French restaurant 40 minutes from our house, the kind of place that took reservations weeks in advance, the kind of place you went when you wanted to impress someone. He'd told me he was going there with a client. I'd said it sounded lovely. The reservation was at 7:30. I did the math, swam until approximately 11:50. Full development by approximately 1:50, color deepening through the afternoon and peak intensity around the time the breadbasket arrived at Bellecour. I poured myself a cup of tea and I waited. At 2:17, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. The camera in the hallway had picked up movement. I opened the feed. The blonde, I'd learned her name by now from a piece of mail that Luca had mistakenly left in his pocket. Ava was standing at our hallway mirror. She'd dressed for the evening. Her hair was blow-dried and she had a small makeup bag open on the console table. She was doing her lipstick, angled toward the glass, when she stopped and leaned closer. She brought her hand up to her forearm and stared at it. Even through the camera, even with the slight lag in the feed, I could see a faint but unmistakable blue-green tinge spreading across her skin, deepest in the creases of her elbow, pooling around her wrists. She turned her arm over, then looked at the other one. She pulled her collar aside and checked her collarbone. She said something I couldn't hear. Then she said it again, louder. I could lip-read it, clearly enough. She ran to the downstairs bathroom. The interior camera was on the exterior wall, which meant I lost her, but I could hear through the audio. The unmistakable sound of taps being wrenched on, water running hard, and what I can only describe as escalating, barely controlled panic. She scrubbed. The dye didn't scrub off. That's the particular quality of keratin-bonded pigment. Water doesn't touch it, neither does soap. What is bonded stays bonded. She came back out into the hallway 7 minutes later. She was a remarkable shade of blue, not a subtle hint or just a tinge you might explain away as a trick of the light. A deep, saturated violet blue that covered her arms, her neck, her face in the places she hadn't covered with makeup, and that was already working its way through the makeup she had applied because the dye was still developing, still deepening, still having the time of its life. She called Luca. I could hear his voice through the phone's speaker, tinny and distant. I'm almost ready. We'll head over around 6. Luca? Her voice was very controlled. Something is wrong with me. There was a pause, then he asked, What do you mean wrong? I'm blue. My skin is blue. I went in the pool and now my skin is blue. This time the pause was longer. Luca, I need you to come here right now. I watched him pull into the driveway on my camera feed at 4:45, saw him walk to the front door and go inside. Then I heard through the audio an exclamation I won't repeat verbatim. I heard her voice fully unraveling, trying to explain what had happened. I heard him, to his considerable discredit, laugh just once, a single involuntary burst that he immediately tried to suppress, which made everything worse. "It's not funny," she said. Her voice had gone flat and dangerous. I'm not, I'm not laughing, I just, another attempt at control. "We'll figure it out, it'll wash off." "It's not washing off, Luca. I've been scrubbing for half an hour. Look at me." The hallway camera gave me a perfect view. He was looking at her. He looked, to his credit, genuinely alarmed, and also, I could see even through the small screen, like a man beginning to understand that something had gone very wrong with a plan he'd thought was airtight. They went to the restaurant anyway. This is the part I still marvel at. Perhaps they thought the lighting would be kinder, or maybe they'd convinced themselves it wasn't as visible as it seemed in the hallway mirror. Maybe Luca, who had made a reservation at Bellecour weeks in advance and didn't want to waste it, had talked her into it with some combination of charm and foolishness. Whatever the reason, they went. I know this because Bellecour on a Friday evening in late September isn't a place where you can be unremarkable. It is a small, intimate restaurant with very white tablecloths and very bright ambient lighting, and the kind of clientele that notices things, the kind that has phones. I first learned what happened there, not from my cameras, which obviously didn't extend to the restaurant, but from a post that appeared in a local Facebook group at approximately 8:45 that evening, captioned, "Anyone else at Bellecour tonight? What is happening?" Attached to it were 3 photographs. In the first, a woman at a corner table was clearly visible, arm raised to accept a menu, her skin an extraordinary shade of indigo. In the second, taken from a different angle, a man seated across from her, recognizably Luca for anyone who knew him, was leaning toward her with the expression of a man trying to quietly manage a catastrophe. In the third photograph, which appeared to have been taken after someone at the table had noticed the photographer, the woman was staring directly into the camera with an expression of absolute fury. By 9 o'clock, the post had 47 comments and had been shared to 2 other groups. By 10, someone had posted a short video clip shot discreetly from across the restaurant, in which you could hear the woman's raised voice. "Stop staring at me," directed at no one in particular, while the other diners performed the very particular social gymnastics of pretending not to notice while very obviously noticing. By midnight, it had 400 shares and a comment thread that ranged from concerned, "Is she okay? This could be a medical emergency," to frankly unkind to genuinely hilarious, including one memorable entry, "Avatar sequel looks incredible." Ava had apparently photographed herself at some point during the evening, perhaps out of some impulse I can only speculate at, and posted it to her own Instagram stories with the caption, "When date night goes wrong," with a heart emoji. I saw this because a mutual acquaintance sent me a screenshot the following morning with the message, "Chloe, isn't that your pool in the background of one of her earlier posts?" It was. It was unmistakably my pool. Luca came home the next morning. I was already there. I'd driven back at 6 a.m., had coffee made, and was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my face professionally arranged. He walked in, saw me, and stopped. "Chloe," his voice was careful, testing. "Good morning," I said. He sat down across from me slowly. He looked tired and rumpled and like a man who had been up most of the night engaged in a series of conversations he had not enjoyed. There was a scratch on his hand. I didn't ask how it got there. "We need to talk," he said. "I know," I said. "I don't know where to start." "Then let me," I said. I turned my laptop to face him. On the screen was a grid of camera footage thumbnails, time-stamped, logged, backed up to the cloud. Ava arriving, Ava swimming, Ava walking through my house. I had 22 hours of footage. He went very still. "The cameras went in on Wednesday," I said. "The pool was treated Wednesday afternoon. I've been at Rachel's since Wednesday evening." The color left his face with remarkable speed. "I also spoke with my attorney on Tuesday," I said, "before I did any of this. So I want you to understand that everything you're looking at was done carefully, legally, and with documentation." He opened his mouth, then closed it like a fish out of water. "I'm not interested in a conversation about Ava," I said. "I'm interested in one about what happens next, and I think you should have that conversation with your own attorney." There was a long silence. Outside, the pool glittered in the morning light, clean and blue and exactly as it had always been. The dye had done its job and dispersed just as Derek had promised. How long? He asked finally. His voice was very quiet. How long what? How long have you known? Long enough, I said. I won't detail the divorce proceedings at length because the specifics are neither interesting nor mine to share alone. What I will say is that the documentation I gathered, the camera footage, the time-stamped evidence of Ava's presence in our home, the spare key I'd had a locksmith confirm was a copy of ours, gave my attorney a position from which Luca had very little room to negotiate. The marital home had been purchased largely with my income. That fact, combined with everything else, produced an outcome that my attorney described as very fair and that I experienced as adequate. The process took 8 months. During those 8 months, Luca and Ava remained together. She photographed herself occasionally on Instagram, though no longer in anyone's pool, and the blue faded from her skin over the first week, then disappeared entirely, leaving no trace except in the screenshots I'd saved and the memory of everyone who'd been at Bellacour that Friday evening. I'm told she still gets the occasional comment. I try not to find this as satisfying as I do. Feminist Clip ran a piece the following spring on the unexpected intimacies of home security technology. I edited it myself but didn't contribute a quote. People ask me sometimes, friends, my sister, the occasional journalist who has somehow heard a version of the story, whether I regret it, whether the pool dye, the cameras, the whole orchestrated unraveling was worth it, whether it was too far, whether it was cruel, and I say the same thing every time. For 9 years, I worked long hours to build a life that I believed in, and someone walked into that life through a door that was opened for them from the inside. They drank my wine, they wore my bathrobe, they swam in my pool, not once, but many times in a home I had paid for while I was at my desk earning the money that kept the lights on. I didn't hurt anyone or break anything. I simply put a perfectly legal, completely harmless substance in my own pool, in my own backyard, and I installed cameras in my own home, and then I watched what happened next. What happened next was that a woman dove into my pool and emerged 4 hours later, having provided the greater metropolitan area with a story that will outlast all of us. I absolutely do not regret it. What I would tell anyone sitting where I sat, parked in their own driveway, staring at a gate that should have been closed, is this: don't react from emotion, react from clarity. Take the time to understand what you have, what you're owed, and what your options actually are, and then, if the situation warrants it, be creative. Because here is the truth that Luca forgot and that I never have. I run a magazine. I have spent my entire career telling stories. I am very, very good at knowing how they should end. This one ended exactly as it should have. Subscribe to Story Junkie for stories that don't pull their punches. Drop A in the comments if you think Chloe played this perfectly, and if you've ever had to rebuild after someone burned your trust to the ground, tell us below. You're among friends here. Take care and God bless.